Okay, welcome back to Hindustan Astrology. I'm Katya, and we have a new episode of Interviews with the Gurus with Dr. Santhip Kanholy again. Thank you so much for joining me again. It's always a pleasure to have you on my channel. And so today we're going to go over Jupiter through the Nakshatras.
Great. Namaste, Katya, and to all your viewers. So today we'll be continuing again the series on understanding the planetary energies through the nakshatras connected with the planet. Yeah, Katya. Now, before I think you need to give me the permission to share my screen.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. So,
there you go.
Let's see. Great. So, what is interesting about Jupiter and its nakshatras is that it's very interesting to think about Jupiter as such. Jupiter is a very expansive planet. Jupiter is a planet that is the storyteller within our mind, that is within ourselves. Jupiter is the counselor, the guru, the teacher. The Jupiter is in fact is the karaka for intelligence also. So we'll try to examine different aspects of these through the lens of nakshatra. So it should be an interesting kind of a journey. So let's go with that. Now, looking at Jupiter nakshatras, you can see Jupiter is actually connected with three different nakshatras in the Vimshotri Dasha system. Again, so it is the ruler of Punvasu nakshatra, Vishaka nakshatra, and Purva Bhadrapada nakshatra. Punarvasu is falling between Gemini and Cancer. You have Vishaka falling between Libra and Scorpio, and Purabhadrapada. All these three nakshatras are having three padas in an air sign and then the one pada is actually falling in the water sign. In fact, they say that since water signs are the moksha signs and Jupiter nakshatras are having padas in the air sign and the water sign, and Jupiter being karaka for guru, they usually say that you need the help of a guru to attain moksha based on this particular simple thing. So that's an interesting thing that they say. Now, of course, the other aspect I've been trying to bring about is how the signs ruled by Jupiter are also having nakshatras there, which would also be bringing about the energy of Jupiter, which is actually the nakshatras falling in the sign of Sagittarius and Pisces. So they are actually Mula, Purashada, Uttarashada. That's interesting. Like crow outside. Let's see. So you have Purabhadrapada, Uttarabhadrapada, and Revati as well. Let's see. What's that as the omen for? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, well, I think I can say that. Yeah, you can see that now, right now, as exactly as I'm about to talk about Uttarashada Nakshatra, you see that Saturn is also there in Uttarashada Nakshatra right now. So, Saturn is usually symbolized by crows. It's very common that, when you're about to talk about something, that particular planet kind of energy can come out also. That's a simple thing like that. So, okay, so here, Uttarashada is an important nakshatra with respect to Jupiter because it's the actual nakshatra where it gets debilitated.
Right.
And then you have Jupiter getting exalted in Pushya nakshatra in Cancer. And Mula nakshatra is the nakshatra where Jupiter has its Mula Trikon portion also. So these three nakshatras are also important. The Mula nakshatra is again falling in Sagittarius sign. So again, let me clarify that further again. So again, Punvasu, Pada 1, 2, 3, and Pada 4, all of them falling from Gemini to Cancer is a Jupiter nakshatra. Vishaka, Pada 1, 2, 3, and Pada 4 falling from Libra to Scorpio again, Jupiter ruled nakshatras. And Purabhadrapada, Pada 1, 2, 3 falling in Aquarius, and Pada 4 going into Pisces. That's under Jupiter nakshatras. And then the other nakshatras linked with Jupiter as what I'm calling it as the Jupiter VIP nakshatras, right? So Jupiter is getting debilitated in Uttarashada nakshatra, the one we just talked about, where Saturn is present, symbolized by the crow. And then you have Pushya nakshatra, where Jupiter is getting exalted, and Mula nakshatra, which is where it's having is Mula Trikon. Now, very important thing here is that Pushya nakshatra is connected with Brihaspati, who is a teacher. And then you have Mula is actually symbolized by the roots. And Uttarashada is actually the nakshatra of final victory. So in many ways, you can think about how you're actually seeking the help of a teacher to kind of uproot your own beliefs and establish new roots within your own mind so that you can attain that final victory of Uttarashada nakshatra. So that's the simplest way to think about Jupiter. at least spiritually, you need the help of a guru to help you in establishing some really long roots, which is Mula. And finally, the final victory that you can always attain is that of the enlightenment. So that's the other aspect that is being symbolized here as well. Now let's actually examine signification of Jupiter in a deeper way. Now, storytelling is an important aspect of our society, so it's kind of important to realize that stories are actually, shared to children and so forth. So now question for you, Katya, is who are the people who normally tell stories in this day and age?
Oh, well, I mean, who tells story? It's in our movies, right? I mean, it's
Mhm.
our the film industry.
Sure, film industry. That's a very good example. Who else get to hear stories, or who else get to tell stories also?
Teachers.
Teachers, that's right. Teachers is true. Anything else?
And
Anyone
also
else?
the mother.
Exactly, right. So you can see mother to children. That is one way, definitely, how the stories are being passed on from generation to generation and so forth. Then you have grandparents to children as well, which is what is seen in this picture, like an Native American elder sharing stories and so forth. And then finally, priests to society. Priests are the ones who are maintaining the stories, the mythological stories of the day. Or definitely, as you said correctly, with respect to movies, also movies are definitely the directors are the modern day priests who are handling these stories and passing on, trying to pass on a story to the society as well through the movies and so forth. So that's an interesting kind of thing with the storytelling aspect. Now, of course, storytelling, as I said, is one of the most important ritual through which culture, tradition, and mythology has been passed down to future generations. Now, it's very important thing to recognize that all these are Jupiterian aspects. The ritual is a Jupiterian aspects. Culture, tradition, mythology is also having its own Jupiterian aspects, and being passed down, something that is being passed down to a future generation. The culture that you grow up in, the rituals that you grow up with, and so forth. That is the job of a priest, the mother and the grandmother, and everyone else who's connected with Jupiter and kind of energy to make sure it is passed on to the future generation and so forth. Now, when you look into storytelling, it's an important requirement to understand more about mythology. Now, there's a very famous author whose name is Joseph Campbell, and I'm just reading some of the quotes about Joseph Campbell by other movie stars and the like. So Mel Gibson says, if you read Joseph Campbell, who has written amazing books on mythology and religion, they all do come together at some point. There are some of the greatest stories that have ever been in the Bible. All you have to do is read the book of Maccabee. It's like a film script, right? So talk about like a movie actually saying a very powerful story. Now, this is what Robert Redford had to say. I believe in mythology. I guess I share Joseph Campbell's notion that a culture or society without mythology would die. We are close to that, and that's very true. Imagine a world without movies, so you just be bored to death. It's as simple as that. Joseph Campbell actually wrote the famous book, The Power of Myth, in which he analyzed the mythological foundation behind every cultural story. In which he did his research. He was able to make quotes like a one sentence definition of mythology. Mythology is what we call someone else's religion. Myths are clues to spiritual potentialities of the human life. Myths are public dreams. Dreams are private myths. So those are very interesting kind of ideas about myths. And of course, there are some more quotes about Joseph Campbell saying myth is much more important and true than history. History is just journalism, and you know how reliable that is. This is again a
All
quote by
right.
Joseph Campbell. Yeah, we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. Every religion is true one way or the other or another. It is true when understood metaphorically, but when it gets stuck in its own metaphors, interpreting them as facts, then you are in trouble. Now that makes a lot of sense, and because at the end of the day, Joseph Campbell was trying to say there is something called as the hero's journey, in which you are the hero of your own story. And that's what he was trying to say. In fact, that the hero's journey is an important aspect of every story that's out there. It's like every mythological story is having its own hero's journey embedded in it. To a point where there were others who were saying no Hollywood script would get approved by the producers and the like unless they had a hero's journey component to it. It says innate to our consciousness with respect to that. Now, so and usually what happens in a hero's journey is that there is an initial act in which the act one is that of, he begins off like living in an ordinary world. There's a call to adventure hook, bargain without knowing or refusal of the call. That kind of theme is there. Eventually, he meets a mentor, supernatural aid, or meeting the white spirit. A road of trials and tests. Then, there is a lot of tests the hero has to go through. Whales, Billy, enemies, allies, obstacles, all that. And then there's a first threshold. Crossing the first threshold, the final test plot point. That's definitely seen. Approach to the inmost cave. Heroes, Gamos, a sacred marriage meeting the shadow self. He meets the villain of the story. Wild bride and bridegroom meeting the goddess, a god, at one man with father, mother, finding love in the underworld. This kind of theme. Now there's a separation act, then there's a descent kind of thing happening here. Then there's an ordeal, there's a challenge, wandering, harrowing of the soul, elixir, theft, ultimate boon or reward. The second threshold is now reached. Crossing the second threshold where new rules are being happening, which is the second act now. It's the supreme ordeal. So it is usually symbolized by a refusal of the return, Apotheosis realm, wild woman or man, a rescue from without, death of dreams, black moment. This is the dark night of the soul we all go through, and that's definitely part of every character in a movie and so forth, the books also. And then there's a third threshold, crossing the third threshold, sacrifice to action, plot point to, and so forth. Now, showdown then happens after at the third threshold point, where there's a resurrection that eventually happens, and then there is a world dancer or wrap up. Now, all these are part of the Act 3, which is a unification act, in which the hero is the master of two worlds. He has incorporation, that kind of thing happening, and finally the cross threshold with the freedom to live, and then the whole thing goes again. So it's a very important thing to recognize. We are all in our hero's journey. And definitely Joseph Campbell was able to extract the hero's journey plot line, hidden within all the mythological stories that are out there. Now, it's a very important thing to recognize all the souls, especially come to the astrology. We are all going through various aspects of our own hero's journey in many ways, and that could come about in different kind of acts, like what is shown here, like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and finally the fourth threshold being reached out and so forth. Now, so here what I've done here is that I kind of comprised, we have talked about so far about the fundamental aspects of storytelling and what a hero has to go through and so forth. Now, analyzing it further, you can kind of break down the act of storytelling into three different parts. One part is that of the varied emotions which the hero is going through along the hero's journey. The joys, the sadness, the dark night of the soul, and then finally the final victory and so forth. All that you can see, the various emotion. And then, but the aspect of storytelling is incomplete without a plot diagram. Like you could say there is a plot involved. Like there is an initial incident, there is a rising action, then there's a climax, then there's a falling action, and eventually there's a resolution. So the Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4 kind of thing going on. All the thresholds and so forth, that can also be plotted. That can also be, you can kind of draw a diagram about it. And then finally, there is the final victory kind of thing that is actually happening, the aspect of story. So all the stories with bad endings are not so great stories, So movies with horrible endings are like poor movies, we hate them. But good movies at the same time, we all like them also. So,
like
so here's
Star Wars, perfect hero's journey, and also the tarot major arcana cards are the hero's journey as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So now here's the question for you, Katya. So which nakshatras would you associate with these three different aspects of storytelling?
Well, let's see. So like, where would we start and where would we end?
You can see the emotional aspect here, the various emotional aspects.
Would be Pushya, right?
Pushya, that's correct. Yeah, emotional would be Pushya. It's Pushya and Cancer, where there's a lot of emotions that is, driving the whole story forward. That's the other aspect there. Right. Yeah. What about the plot and so forth?
That would be Mula.
Yeah, it would definitely be Mula. You can see the Mula as the narrative, the abstract, the foundation that the entire characters are revolving around the foundation and so forth, the world that is happening and so forth. What about the last one?
That's a good question. My first guess was Purva Bhadrapada.
Purva Bhadrapada. Well, it's not that far.
It's Vishaka because it's victorious.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thinking. Definitely, I think that's a very good thinking. But
Okay.
here, what I just wanted to share was the final
Oh,
victory
Tara.
aspect of Uttarakhand, which is the final victory aspect. So you have the evolution of the hero's journey having these three fundamental elements. One is the pushya, which is the varied emotion in cancer, the self-transformation which the hero has to go through and so forth. Then you have the mula, which is the foundations around that particular narrative for that energy. And then finally, the final victory of the hero, which is the Uttarashada Nakshatra and so forth. That's the other aspect here. But here again, what I've done is that I've taken one aspect of Jupiter, which is the aspect of storytelling, and I've connected the nakshatras of Jupiter with that particular aspect. And that's a very important thing way to think about these planets and so forth also. So hopefully this part is clear, where you can actually understand Jupiter expressing itself through the nakshatras linked with Jupiter. Now we'll actually take it, so like I said, Pushya is actually the nakshatra where the teacher probably helps the emotions which the heroes going through is actually seen. Mula is again the roots or the plot diagram, as we just mentioned. Uttarashadha can be the final victory aspect. So in many ways, Uttarashadha is actually pointing to the highest function of Jupiter, in which Jupiter is trying to teach you to attain victory over yourself. That's the role of a teacher in here. And so that's a very important aspect also. You know, Now here's one more way to think about Jupiter. So Jupiter is actually Karka for intelligence. So Jupiter can be linked with brains. Now, how do you see the Jupiter in nakshatras playing out through the brain aspect? So you already know that Jupiter in nakshatras are Punvasu, Vishaka, and Purvabhadrapada. The Punvasu is a nakshatra which is concerned with repetition. You could think about Punvasu as as the neurons and the groups of neurons that function together. So when you have a neuronal circuit, and when you're stimulating the same circuit again and again, then that particular pathway gets strengthened and your memory improves and so forth, right? So you can kind of think about the repetitive aspect, the iterative aspect of the thinking that is enhancing your memory, that enhancing a habit, that's enhancing a skill set that you have, and so forth. So the repetitive aspect can actually be seen, in this particular through the Purnavasu nakshatra, which is a Jupiter nakshatra. Now that again, neurons are what comprises the brain, and Jupiter is Karka for intelligence, and Jupiter is definitely Karka for brain also in many ways. So because intelligence is linked with brain, at least for now. Now you
Right.
also have Jupiter in Nakshatra Vishaka. Now the aspect of brain that you can link with Vishaka is actually the two hemispheres of the brain. So the hemispheres of the brain is very interesting. You have the left hemisphere and the left brain, which is like completely like left brain oriented, an analytic side, a logical side, and so forth. And then you have the creative right brain, which is the aspect that is creating passion within us, that is as creating a lot of self-expression and so forth. So there is and clearly Vishaka Nakshatra natives are skilled in both. These are the natives who might definitely be having a left brain kind of job, but they will equally be having a right brain kind of thing going on also, very strongly. So these are natives who can actually have both the left brain and the right brain thing going on. That's a very interesting aspect as well. Now, very important thing with left brain and right brain is that again we are still talking about brain, and we are actually using a Jupiter and Nakshatra also at the same time to describe the brain. That's the key aspect here. Now the final aspect of Jupiter and Nakshatra of Ajay Egapata's Purvabhadrapada, you can actually connect that with the spine. A spine is a very important aspect. Your intelligence is directly linked with the spine. So spine is the body part that integrates all different body parts along with the brain. So the first messages from the brain actually goes down to the spine, and then it integrates and connects with all the rest of the body parts is actually coordinated with it. And in fact, for a yogi, the spine is extremely important. The spine can actually be called as the dragon energy within ourselves also, because the Kundalini energy rises through the spine as well. So Ajay Egapada is actually the one foot, the unborn one who's standing on 1 foot. That is the thing with Ajay Egapada, and you can actually see that with the spine and the brain and so forth. The unborn one, which is the brain, holding on 1 foot of the spine, the feet being our tailbone, and tailbone is a very important aspect with respect to all the esoteric traditions and so forth. But again, what you're seeing is that your intelligence is finally being coordinated through the spine, through the rest of the body and to the rest of our life as well. And you can also see that, esoterically, the spine is also linked with various aspects of chakras and so forth. So, so then you can see how that higher intelligence of Jupiter, which is actually coming at the brain and is eventually being dissipated or dispersed and distributed through the spine as well. So so here again, what I've done is I looked at the karka for Jupiter. One of the karkas of Jupiter is actually intelligence. So good Jupiter, very good chance that this native is very strong, very excellent intelligently. And again, at least now we have this intelligence team linked with the brain, and you are actually looking at various aspects of brain through Jupiter and Nakshatras. So that's what you've done here. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I've also heard Aja Ekapada called not just a dragon, but a unicorn type of dragon.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Unicorn.
Yes,
Unicorns.
the
Yeah.
third eye.
Yeah.
And the part of the brain that connects the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, if you go straight back from the third eye.
Yeah.
And that's a very special kind of intelligence. It's
100%. Yeah, definitely. Unicorn is definitely Ajay Gapata is that special kind of intelligence that can be linked. Definitely. When you awaken the Kundalini, the final step of enlightenment, they say, when there is a spark between the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. Now, Ajay Kapada is that lightning strike, that signal that is connecting the pituitary gland and the pineal gland. In many ways, that is true. When you do so, then you become Ekapada, you become unborn one. That's also true. I think that's a very good point. Definitely, I do think does has that aspect of the higher intelligence, but definitely. So yeah, so that's a very good observation. That's an excellent point, Katya. So I can say that definitely there is a deep aspect of intelligence of Jupiter and so forth. But again, when you begin to look for the nakshatras linked with that planet, you're actually beginning to see how those energies are actually manifesting externally in different ways also. And this is a different kind of way to think about the Jupiterian energies, and that's something that needs to be brought about more. So that's what I've demonstrated here. And then you can apply the same kind of logic to all kind of karakas with other planets and even other Jupiterian significations also. You begin to see the nakshatras linked with Jupiter acting out. So yeah, so that's what I have, Katya, unless you have any questions for me.
Well, I mean, Jupiter right now is in Uttara Ashada and on the Sagittarius side. So he's not debilitated. So how would you interpret that?
Yeah, definitely. The Ashada Nakshatras are linked with war. It's like the when you think about war, war is having deep thing going on. So in essential, Ashada Nakshatras are having the energy of before victory, which is Purva Ashada. Uttara Ashada is the final victory. So there is a victorious aspect that is present there. But victory only happens when you actually fight for something. So when you begin to look for the motivations that are driving us, that's when the motivations allow you to fight for victory in the end. So and we are all at war. We are all at war with life. So definitely right now is a very important aspect in which we are definitely questioning our deepest motivations. You definitely need to be looking at what is worth fighting for in our own lives. That's usually a question. Now this requires strategical kind of thinking, which is the excellent job of Jupiter, which is the job of an advisor or a counselor and so forth. So right now, everyone should be getting some very good advice, no matter what. And then when advice can come from many sources, it can come from teachers, it can come from books, it can come from really intelligent people, it can come from your own intelligence also. You will actually begin to see the kind of intelligent aspect of within you actually coming forth more during this time period. So yeah, this is a very good time period to study, very good time period to expand your intelligence. Most of them would be going back to school. Many people will be connected with lawyers, who are much more intelligent than us, how to strategically deal with situations. Many people would be connecting with, teachers also right now. There would definitely have been an expansion with the intelligence energy in our own lives in many ways. So if you have been thinking about joining back to school, it's not an accident. If you have been thinking about taking an online class, that's not an accident either. have been thinking about just completing the book which you have started. It's not any accident either. Even now, I do think that all that will be accurate right now with Jupiter in the Ashada Nakshatras. Yeah.
Right. And then I think it's like December 8th, he goes back into Capricorn. And
It's November 23rd, right? From what I remember, yeah, November 23rd.
oh, is that when you want to take a
Yeah,
look? You want to stop your screen
yeah,
share?
sure, yeah.
I'll,
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
I'll open mine. So just, yeah, so next month he goes out of retrograde. So yeah, November 20th. He goes into back at, so he becomes debilitated at that time, but he's still in Uttara Ashada and he's with Saturn. And so he's kind of riding on the back of Saturn's, strength in his own sign. So even though he's debilitated, he's going to get the help of Saturn at that time. And then by, I believe it's December 20th, they have a complete conjunction. Yeah, on that day. So how would you interpret that? Just so that people, I know we've talked about it before, but it's coming up soon. And now we see what's going on in the world. How are you interpreting this debilitation?
Yeah, well, definitely I would say there could be some challenges. Like, I mean, the world is still, there is a lot of parts of the world which is still facing this war-like pandemic right now, So I think that kind of thing could kind of intensify around that. Last time when Jupiter was in Uttarashada, was in Capricorn, was when the whole pandemic kind of took off in a big way. There was this lockdown.
And I've said this to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And so when this is actually happening, it's going to be, the ascendant will be Leo, which makes this in the 6th house of health. But it's also the house of enemies too. So, yeah, I feel like.
Yeah, usually with Ashadas, there is definitely a war aspect, so definitely there can be something war-like going on. But it could also be competitions and so forth. So there can be a very strong element of competition that can definitely play out. You could even say, now what is interesting with Saturn Jupiter itself is that it's a niche banga kind of happening. The Jupiter's debilitation. Sure, Jupiter is getting debilitated in Capricorn, but that debilitation is being cancelled on account of Jupiter being the sign lord of Saturn. So, but again, but there's a different change. The way it will play out is that thus initially there'll be a Nietzsche aspect, like how the Jupiter energies will experience this fallen aspect, and then the Saturn aspect will come in, which will kind of begin to lift that Jupiter energy up. So usually that's how the niche manga will play out. So usually there can be initial problems. I would say, definitely the economy will have some kind of unexpected problems and so forth. And then, eventually it will begin to build back up and, definitely slowly and steadily everything will begin to grow back upwards, When the conjunction happens, definitely that's always a very significant conjunction. Double transit of Saturn and Jupiter, wherever it's falling in your house is very important. So you're actually having two heavyweight planets being willing to like disperse karmas with respect to that particular house,
Right.
So,
and Saturn's giving his 3rd and strongest aspect to Mars at that time, so also indicating war and strife. And then Jupiter is giving his 5th aspect to Rahu at that time.
Yeah. So hopefully definitely Rahu, Mars transit to Gantanda is not easy. That's never easy and never. Anytime Mars transits to Gantanda, it's always going through a challenging kind of thing. That particular Mars is very strong because it's a Vargota Mars. That's what Mars is actually going to the same sign in the Navamsha. So, at that particular moment, definitely there can be some intensifications of karma. There can be some unexpected challenges and so forth. Definitely, I do think there could be some, it may not be easy time period, but definitely we all might be called to action in many ways, in our own lives with various aspects of our lives and so forth. Saturn, Jupiter both are in a natural 10th house of career for many, like in the natural zodiac. So many of us are going to question about our jobs and so forth. Many of
Right.
them will be questioning about what's worth pursuing and so forth. That kind of a thing can become very strong. But yeah, definitely from as far as the pandemic kind of thing is concerned, sure, we might have a vaccine and all that. But then, around that time period also, there might be something you need to be, in general, we need to be careful of and so forth also, So
What is
that
the
could be,
natural house of politics? Is it the fifth house because it's speculations, or would it be sixth house?
yeah, usually it's sixth house.
Sixth
Well,
house. Okay.
fifth house also having a link because it's connected with Pada Prapti as it's called. Fifth house is like the house where you attain a position of the king and so forth, So that's a fifth house kind of aspect to the winning the political election and so forth. But then you have sixth house of competition, uh, which is the actual election parts and so forth, which the political leader has to deal with and so forth. So those two different aspects to that, in my
Right.
opinion. Yeah, that's the other
And it's
aspect there.
going to be, just 5 weeks after the US presidential election.
Yeah.
And whoever wins, there's going to be a civil war because it's, nobody, not everybody's going to be happy, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's the case after election, right? So it is always interesting that it'll be interesting to see what happens. Definitely it can be intense kind of situation there. Definitely.
what do you think about this Venus K2 conjunction at this time?
Yeah, a lot of scandals. Relationship scandals and so forth,
With
unexpected
women.
scandals. Yeah, with women, yeah, definitely. I think the last time when Saturn was actually transiting over Anuradha, I think there was this Ashley Madison hack that broke up a lot of relationships. Because
Who?
then the Ashley Madison website, right? So there was this Ashley Madison
Oh,
website.
right.
Yeah. So that happened when Saturn was transiting through Scorpio. So something like that. So Venus with Ketu is not great for relationship. Usually, people from the past showing up, unexpected kind of challenges with regard to relationship. All that can definitely be playing out. Venus though might actually help ease with your breakup though. That's the thing I can say. Venus is like, okay, fine. This is a planet that can kind of show you the harshness of breakup, but then at least you'll kind of move forward and so forth. But again, the aspect is that because it's with Ketu, so it could be like a past life karma coming forth. Usually, I've seen that if there is a history of if there was a bride that was not treated well within the family lineage at some point, that kind of karma shows up at this point with Venus. Anytime planet transits over Ketu. Now, Venus with Ketu, if there was a wife that was not treated well, this particular karma is showing up very strongly. Usually, Venus Ketu can also show deep psychological transformation with what you're looking for, relationships and so forth. Also, there's also a different aspect there.
And
Yeah,
it's for Washington, D.C., it's in the fourth house of the homeland.
yeah. So that can be some
So,
scandal.
you know,
Yeah.
we now know that we have Kamala Harris as the Democratic VP um, candidate.
Mhm.
And, K2 can be poisonous. And having this together, I just think of like the vitriol,
Mhm.
of anger of women in the homeland at this time. This could indicate that they lost,
Wow.
especially
Okay.
with all this stuff over here. I mean, Uttara Ashada is Ganesha. Ganesha is the elephant, and that's the Republican Party.
Yeah, yeah, I do think Jupiter and Uttarashada can improve the Republican Party's potential. But yeah, it will be interesting to see the effect of Saturn also. Now Jupiter is debilitated in Uttarashada, but again Saturn is canceling the Neechbanga. So perhaps it could be a long-term kind of thing. All the variation can definitely play out. With Venus and Ketu, definitely that cannot be easy for women. That's true. That is also possible. Yeah, definitely.
Right. And, moon's in Aquarius that day in Purva Bhadrapada, again, indicating Jupiter, but this is in Saturn's sign. So, I mean, it's very convoluted.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
There's
it
so
can be
many
challenging
opinions
time.
right now on, who's going to win, but we look at the yogi point for that day, and it's in Aquarius, which is where the moon and Neptune are in
Mhm.
Saturn's sign.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So it can be challenging for sure. That particular time period can be challenging. Moon is actually hemmed between Mars and Saturn on either side also. So that's also a challenging kind of a transit, anyways.
And we have a Kala Sarpa Yoga.
Yeah. It's not a complete Kala Sarpa Yoga
Right.
because
This is
Venus
out,
is
yeah, this
outside.
is, well,
But
but this
still, the
is
effect.
inside it though. I mean, Venus is, this is at the higher degree. So Venus would be on the inside of the circle.
Yeah, but on if you look at it, it's coming from 25 degrees of Gemini on Taurus, right? So Venus is on the side. Venus is the lone planet from 25 degrees Taurus to 25 degrees Scorpio. So it's not a complete Kalsapa Yoga, but I would still say there can still be an element of Kalsapa Yoga energy there. That's a possibility there. Even that's an interesting kind of research aspect. What happens when you have all the sun planets, well, 6 planets inside a Kalsapa yoga thing, which is happening with the rest of the planets, and then one planet is outside. Can you still call it as a Kalsapa yoga or not? That's definitely
Right. This would be, it's still lesser than 25, but having this sitting here, this would be indicating like, hello, I have something to say, so Venus has a lot to say
yeah,
during
yeah, definitely, it is possible. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It'll be very
Mars again. And, Mars was at the fulcrum of the Kalasarpa yoga of all the eclipses this year. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is the fulcrum of this one.
mm-hmm.
And that's in Saturn's sign, pointing back to this.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, definitely that can be. It may not be easy time period. Yeah, but hopefully, when Saturn moves direct, Saturn can give some strength and kind of slow down the real impact. Usually the problems arise more, it becomes more severe when Mars is involved. When Saturn is involved, it's like troublesome. It's like not easy. You just have to get through obstacles and so forth. But when Mars is involved, then it spikes up. Mars is in Gantana though, so like I said, so we'll have to wait and see. I do think it can be an important kind of it can be challenging time period for sure. This Christmas, don't make any big trips. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And I'm looking at the declination, and Mercury's out of bounds. He's almost at 25
Yeah.
degrees. And so, Mercury that day is in Mula. So there's going to be a lot of, anger being stirred up from the roots, of people being very upset, especially with Pluto.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of upsetting energy. That's something I can say. Now, you can be upset about the government or you can be upset about your own life. So that's the two different aspect of that. Definitely upsetting energy is coming. But the good thing is that you can kind of deal with the energy in a consistent fashion, and you can finally, like I said, you can definitely attain the final victory kind of aspect also at the same time. Especially that is a promise with planets, Uttarashada Nakshatra. So
Right.
you get to fight a battle, but you end up winning your own battle also in the end, or you begin to realize the actual battle that needs to be fought and the actual battle that you need to be putting your energy towards. So that can also play out. So it can definitely be challenging, but I do think it can be good in that regard. At least in clearing up the energies that needs to be cleared up also in the end.
Right. Yeah. And Rahu in the 10th house. So this would be, the serpent energy of the Kalasarpa yoga would be 10th house kind of serpent, which has to do with, you know, twisting
Yeah,
and
usually.
career and recognition in career, reputation.
Yeah, I can say that you can make a lot of money. Well, we'll talk about this in a different video, but I can say that with Rahu and Taurus getting an aspect from Jupiter, and Jupiter is getting debilitated. So a lot of financial institutions, educational institutions will have to go through a reality check. That's the key thing I can say. Everything Jupiter, even religious institutions will have to go through a reality check also. So it can be slowed down. It will be a slow and steady, and it won't be an easy time period for that because Jupiter can indicate the priest of the society as well. So that's one of those interesting aspects there. So a banker is a modern day priest. You feel hopeful when a banker approves a loan or whatever, right? That kind of thing going on. So you can say that usually these natives might actually, definitely those institutions will go through a very tough time, and they'll go through some real soul searching kind of thing going on also. There can really be some soul searching energies at that point. Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for discussing Jupiter, and I hope this helps everybody. And of course, if you guys have any questions about stuff, just email us. But as we go through our series, we will next have Saturn. So that's going to be exciting. I love Shani. He's my favorite.
Great. Yeah. Great.
Okay. Thank you so much, Santhip.
Sure. Thank you,
Okay.
Kathy.
Till next time.